is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
All right, welcome to another 3-Maw Pod. We are now back home from Dallas from Big 12 Media Days. Had a good time there a couple days that we were down there and got a lot of good content for you guys. So far, we've released 6 or 7 different episodes that hopefully many of you had an opportunity to catch up on. We're releasing another one today with another interview from Big 12 Media Days. We're fortunate to be graced with the presence of Brock Huard, college football analyst for Fox. Again, I've said it before, but I think him and Jason Benetti are really the best crew on TV when it comes to college football coverage. Just enjoy them immense amount when they are calling K-State games. So we're going to have that interview for you on this podcast. Before we kick to that, though, we, as always, got to thank our friends at Holiday Distillery, Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon and 360 Vodka. Go get your bottles. Go get Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. Pick some up at the local liquor store as you get ready for what should be an exciting college football season. Start to get your tailgate gear spruced up here as we start to approach the month of August and near football season. So we got to thank our friends at Holiday Distillery as they support us. So we're going to go ahead and kick it over to Brock Huard. We talked for about 10 minutes about this upcoming season, preview kind of the Big 12 landscape, K-State, talk about K-State football, Will Howard, and a variety of other topics. And then we'll talk more in depth kind of about what stood out at Big 12 Media Days and some of the common themes when we come back from that Brock Huard interview. So more to come after Brock, but we'll kick it over to Brock right now and hope you enjoy.
We are back at Big 12 Media Days live from Arlington. I'm John Kurtz, joined by Cole Manbeck, and of course Brock Huard that you guys recognize from Fox. Got a chance to do some K-State games last year, so I'm sure everybody is pretty familiar here. The podcasts here are, as always, brought to you by Holiday Distillery, 360 Vodka, Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. Go out and get it. Get stocked up for your tailgates and get stocked up for lake season, whatever it is that you're doing this summer.
Gift anywhere?
Yeah,
we'll get you.
Brought some,
we'll get some shipped out to you, Brock.
Are you more whiskey or vodka guy?
Beggars can't be choosers.
Okay, fair enough. I like that. You got to see K-State a decent amount last year. Put in perspective for us what you thought of the run to the Big 12 title.
I think they were undefeated on my watch. Is that correct?
No, the Texas game got us.
That's right, yeah. Texas. Yeah,
so close. I know you guys have talked to Coach Kleiman, and truth be told, we have someone on our crew, our associate director, that looks just like Chris Kleiman. In fact, we call him, his name is BZ. We're like, hey, Coach, because he is a spitting image of Coach Kleiman. And we just love, I really do. I love coming to Manhattan once. I'm good with coming twice. The trip the third time gets a little bit more difficult just because of the trials and the travails to make your way to Manhattan, but nothing but respect for him, for his staff. I look at Coach Kleiman, I look at Kalen DeBoer at my alma mater, and I look at Lance Leipold, and there's a similarity between those three. And he talked about it today on that stage, did Coach, and that is just continuity matters. Having those people that you have worked with for years along different stops. And when you have that, your culture gets established faster. Your belief in what you're doing is strong because you've been there and you've done it and you've been a winner along the way. And I don't think there's any doubt that their continuity of staff, when you sit and meet with them like we get to at our level, you feel it instantly, much like I did with Lance Leipold and certainly Kalen DeBoer at Washington.
A huge part of it was the quarterback that he had last year, and Will Howard, obviously, coming in for Adrian Martinez. You saw some of both, but curious your take on, Jalen Daniels gets most outstanding player, or offensive player of the year, rather, for the league, and is the first team All Big 12 quarterback. How do you kind of view where Will Howard's respect level? Preseason. Should Will Howard have been the guy?
What does that matter? What does any of this preseason stuff even matter? I appreciate the magazines, and I love Phil Steele, and it's a lot of information. But any of this preseason stuff, just ask TCU. Did it really matter that they were picked 7th last year? Neil Brown said we will not finish last, which is where the West Virginia was picked in this poll. So, I don't. If I'm Will Howard, that's just a bigger, further chip, right? How far that guy came last year, that was one of the most remarkable stories. The Kansas program came out of the depths, and that's, that preseason stuff's probably testament and credit to that. K-State did not have to do that, but individually, where Will Howard was the 2 previous years, watching him and watching that tape, and then watching him last year, there was, I don't know, it's on one hand of individuals who had made the biggest turn of development in their career. It was night and day. When he got in there, he was a different guy physically, a different guy mentally, and both Chris and Colin Klein have just got to own the lion's share of that credit, as does Will, for being able to just have the resolve and the guts to turn it around. So that's to me the most important is, okay, you probably should have been maybe comeback player of the year last year. If they have that award in the league, that's more important. The confidence that he has going in. Any of this preseason stuff, I don't put a ton of merit in.
What do you make of this K-State football team heading into this year as the defending Big 12 champs, Brock?
I think that they will still be pretty good defensively. Your corners last year, and Brent's, you could just feel his swag, man. I watched a Legion of Boom in Seattle. Yeah. Right. I watched them just transform a defense. And I'm not going to go that far last year, but they were the league champs. They did beat TCU in this building. Yep. And the back end of that, Hayes and Brent's and crew were why. They were so good back there. And when you can just play man and you go, lock it up, boys, and let the rest of these 9 guys just play, and in their scheme, 8 of them just play, that will be where I'd have the most watchful eye. Because that was such an advantage for them as that year built, and their swagger and their confidence grew, and it didn't matter. Play us man. Put us out there. Let the rest of you go play. And, really defenses, if you think about it, they're built one of 2 ways. Either their front 4 beats the 5 and lets everybody else play behind him, or you have that back end with 2 corners that can play lockdown man, and with Hayes really playing man as well. 3 guys that you feel can take away anybody. Then you let those 8, play free. So that will be where my eyes will be early. Replacing those 2 guys is going to be a big part of their story.
I know we're not, you don't care for the preseason projections, but Texas picked to win the league, K-State picked to finish second. How do you kind of view the overall Big 12 this year?
Yeah, I think that's fair. If I had to vote, which I don't, because I think it's ridiculous, but if I did have to vote on that stuff, that's probably what I would vote. Okay. Because when Texas, if we marched all these teams out of that tunnel right behind us and said, okay, here's the top 40 on Texas, right, or 45, whatever you want to do, NFL roster, call it 53. Here's the top 53 of Texas off the hoof. Whoa, those guys look pretty good, and then you kind of march Oklahoma and some of the others that would look pretty good. K-State would probably be roster-wise, I don't know, 3rd, 4th, 5th, somewhere in there. But again, that secret sauce is their culture, it's their development. Jerry DePoto up in Seattle says about the Mariners, we are a draft, develop, and trade organization. That's what we are. And when I think of K-State, they're not on the necessarily drafting side, although they're dipping in the portal more, but that development side, and you guys know this, I'm preaching to the choir here, this has been what the essence of the program is, but they develop. So no matter what they would have looked like walking out of that tunnel 2 years ago, last year, this year, they're developmental, and with what they accomplished, they should be number 2 heading into this season.
Kind of that next tier in the Big 12, TCU, Oklahoma, Baylor, Oklahoma State. How do you sift through where you think those teams are going to fall? Texas Tech, you're right, kind of a dark horse this year.
Texas Tech's kind of they're kind of a dangerous one. And any trip out to Lubbock this year, and you felt it last year, it started to rise. And when Oregon goes down there week 2, I'm going to be watching that one pretty darn closely, because to me that will be a significant tale. And when their coach says today we had the fastest recruiting class in America, trying to do what Matt Rule did at Baylor years ago, and just taking speed and playing in that madhouse, and with all that noise and all that chaos in Lubbock with their great fans, they're going to be, if you're going to make that next level down, I think I would include them in that list. Yeah. Sonny Dykes joined our seminar kind of offline. We had our Fox seminar last week, and you could sense what you sensed yesterday, and that is, don't count us out. We lost a lot of people, lost our coordinator. Don't count us out, because, Gary recruited a lot of talent there, and they won a lot of games down there in Fort Worth for a reason, because there's a lot of talent in that area. He likes his team much more than the voters like his team heading into this year. They didn't like him last year either. But to me, you got to knock them out. And right out the gate with Colorado, at Nebraska, we will get a pretty good beat on some of these next level teams really quickly.
Dynamics of the league are changing, obviously, with 4 new teams coming in.
Yep.
It's going to look different next year without Texas and Oklahoma, too. Who do you feel like is poised to kind of take the reins of this conference with a power vacuum with Texas and OU leaving?
Yeah, I think there's a reason your leadership administration in Manhattan extended Coach Kleiman, because he's been there and done it, although he was at North Dakota State for all those years, but it's success, it's winning, it's culture, it's all those things that carry over, and certainly carried over last year. I think at BYU is going to be very intriguing to watch. They're just demographic of whom they recruit, the size of that roster, and now if they can just get a little more, right? If they get into Florida, or they get into Texas, or they get into some doors that in the past as an independent they didn't get into. In the years to come, that will be intriguing. Have either of you ever been to Provo to a game up there?
I can't wait. Can't wait.
Wish.
Yes. Haven't been.
It is going. You guys will go, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
This is one of those I'm going to put in my top 10 of doing games around the country of great fans, an amazing environment, super, super pretty with the mountains in the background, tough place to play with altitude.
Yep.
And obviously the bounce house. See, I look at this maybe a little differently, and this was probably a decade or more. I worked with Mike Bellotti, the old Oregon coach. And we were in a 3-man booth. And I remember jobs came open and different things, and I wondered, hey, would he ever entertain any of them? And he taught me that the way coaches look at it is, have others won there before? Sonny Dykes took over TCU and couldn't wait to take that job because Gary won there before. Places where you've won before. George O'Leary won at UCF, and Scott Frost won at UCF, and you have enough talent and demographics and recruiting. If you do it right, you put the right stuff into it and develop, you can win down there. They're going to be pretty dangerous. And obviously Houston now finally getting their chance to get back into a Power 5 conference. It's going to be very, very different without Oklahoma and Texas. But I think with those, and I didn't even include Cincinnati and Ohio and all of that pipeline too, I know why this commissioner's pretty excited about the future.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, Brock, I mean, the last 15 years, college football landscape, college sports has changed so dramatically with conference realignment.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on realignment and what's transpired over time?
Well, my thoughts are my beloved conference that I played in last century. I don't know what's going to happen, and it scares me to death. That we've got a deal, we got no deal. And the more you say we've got a deal, and that's George Kliavkoff, the commissioner of the Big 12, and the more you continue to put that out there and put that out there and put that out there and not deliver, the more you hurt your perception. This is the only sport that is still a perception is reality sport. As long as we have voters that are voting in playoff teams, and it's going to go from 4 to 12 in the years to come, which will help, but those 12 still have to be voted in by a committee where perception does still matter. And what's happening out west it hurts my soul. Right, just to the very core of me. And it started with UCLA and USC, and I know why, and I know the revenue, and I know the networks, and I know everything that comes to play with that. But it still stings, and until a new deal gets put in place, I will still have a lot of consternation about what's going to happen out west.
Well, Brock, we know you got to run.
Yep.
I really appreciate you taking some time for us. Certainly, best of luck as you move on here through media days, trying to get through media row. But we appreciate it. Take care.
You got it, boys. Thanks.
Thanks, Brock.
You bet, man.
Incredibly grateful for Brock Huard for jumping on the pod with us. He was incredibly busy in Dallas, and just really grateful that he has made a second-time appearance for us on the 3-Maw pod, and some terrific stuff from Brock. Before we toss to break, we got to tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel. Actually, I'm currently rocking a Home Field Apparel t-shirt. It's the 1993 Copper Bowl champ shirt when K-State defeated Wyoming, I think 52-17. One of the more vivid memories I have as a K-State fan at a very young age growing up. I remember watching that game and K-State thoroughly dominating, and just the importance and significance of what that game meant to the K-State football program. So I had to get my hands on this Copper Bowl shirt. There's actually 3 different varieties of the Copper Bowl shirt. There's also a black crew neck sweatshirt, which John Kurtz, who co-hosts the show with us, has. And then there's also a white shirt with purple stripes around. I got just a plain white. But they're just super comfortable. So, I just love the look and the feel of these shirts. I've actually got 7 different Home Field shirts in my closet right now. I got 3 from the latest drop that Home Field had. And one of them is a lavender with a retro K-State logo on it. It's a lavender shirt. I wore that on the way down to Dallas. Just a terrific collection. They've done 2 different drops for K-State over the past year. They did their first drop with a huge collection and variety of K-State shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, etc. And they just recently, in the month of June, did another K-State drop with 10 or 11 different items. So get on over to homefieldapparel.com, check it out, and get some of your K-State gear as you prepare for the upcoming season and watching the defending Big 12 champs. All right, we'll toss to break now, and when we come back, Derek and I are going to talk about what we heard from Big 12 Media Days and some of the things that really stood out.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
All right, we're back from break, and now we get to let Derek talk a little bit here and get some of his thoughts from Big 12 Media Days in Dallas and some of the things that he heard. So, Derek, just to kick things off at a high level, I mean, what were some of the things or common themes that really stood out to you that you wanted to highlight from what you heard at Big 12 Media Days?
Yeah, I think some general takeaways would be that the offense is certainly good enough to repeat as Big 12 champions, and they got to get the defense up to speed in a few spots. So I think the offense is probably ahead of the defense at this point. Probably not a shock to anyone considering just the amount of talent that returns on that particular unit, and combined with how elite of a play caller just in year one Colin Klein was. You return your quarterback and your entire offensive line, you're probably going to feel good about your offense no matter what. You have an all Big 12 tight end, two very capable running backs. So aside from sorting out the receiver position, which I think Chris Kleiman alluded to being the objective on the offensive side of the ball, I think just getting the defense up to speed, because there's going to be a lot of new faces. You do have some guys returning that, we're very familiar with, such as Daniel Green, Nate Matlack, Khalid Duke, those types. But, I mean, you bring back 15 returning starters, and I think, 15 or 16, I think I've seen in places. I know Pete Thamel wrote about that. But I think 8 or 9 of those are probably on the offensive side of the ball. So that means you're probably shuffling in a lot of different starters, particularly in the secondary. I think just aside from Kobe Savage, you'll probably have a different starter in the secondary at every spot aside from Kobe Savage. So I think that was a general takeaway, just having the defense get up to speed in order to repeat as Big 12 champions, because the offense is probably there, considering, you probably only had 2 significant losses, one being Deuce Bond, and you replaced it with Trayshawn Ward and Keegan Johnson, 2 of your better transfer additions and probably the history of the program, at least on paper. So you got to feel good about that. Not that they are Arthur Brown, but they should have significant impacts on the offensive side of the ball. I think second would be just probably the players. A very trendy question, and obviously I'm part of it too. They get asked, this time of year is what guys aren't we talking about? Will we be talking about, right? I think Coach Kleiman raved about Marquise Siegel, the safety transfer from North Dakota State. And then additionally, you heard a lot about Uso Seumalo, the nose guard who's going to be replacing Eli Huggins and is going to have to play a pivotal role, and his caliber of play could determine how good they are on the defensive side of the ball. If you talk to a lot of people with knowledge about the program, just what Uso, how he performs, will probably dictate the direction of the defense. It's an important spot, but he has a chance to really blow up too if he continues the trajectory that he is. Austin Romaine was probably the true freshman discussed the most, and that's really a surprise, just because the linebacker position probably seems to have the most traffic in terms of if you want to find a lot of playing time in year one, or any playing time in year one. It seems like linebacker is a lot of traffic to navigate and maneuver around and to eclipse there. But Austin Romaine was on the tip of everyone's tongue. And it's also shocking because, we're a proponent of this too. Recruiting rankings aren't everything, right? Because if you go back and look at the Kansas State class of 2023 on just about every network, I'd imagine he's probably the least ranked or one of the lesser ranked players in the entire class.
Yeah, he was one of the lesser ranked players. I actually went back and checked. He's in the bottom 5, I believe, in that class on the On3 consensus. I believe the On3 consensus had him as like the 153rd ranked linebacker in the country. True freshman out of Missouri. More of your traditional size linebacker, where he's almost 240 pounds, 6'2", more of a downhill guy. And he didn't have another Power 5 offer, which doesn't mean everything. Of course, K-State has landed tons of guys without Power 5 offers or minimal Power 5s that ended up blowing up and being tremendous football players. I think his best offer was from Tulane out of all of his listed offers, which they certainly know defense. But yeah, Romaine was a guy that was brought up by every single player. I mean, I remember Daniel Green, when I asked him about guys standing out at linebacker on the pod that we released earlier this week, the first guy I think he said outside of Austin Moore was Austin Romaine. And I kind of, hit pause in my head and was a little bit surprised by that. But maybe we shouldn't be surprised, DY, just because he's probably picking things up very quickly. If you go back and look at his profile, he had offers from almost every Ivy League school. So probably a really cerebral player that's picked up the system very fast. I mean, he had Penn, Yale, Brown, Harvard. That's just a Rice, which is an Ivy League, but a really, high academic type school. So
who else?
Who's that?
Will Howard.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Will, and you guys will hear it on a podcast being released later this week with Stan Weber, but Stan Weber said Will Howard is the smartest quarterback in the country. And again, I mean, that's a common theme too, just because it's another guy that had big time Ivy League offers, really intelligent guy. So yeah, the Austin Romaine thing, that really stood out. Marcus Siegel was a guy that DYU asked Coach Kleiman, and it's on the podcast that was released last week, about who's the next guy out of the secondary that makes it to the NFL, and his response was Marcus Siegel. I mean, are you surprised with all the mentions from him? North Dakota State transfer, who's a junior. It's hard to gauge stats from like the secondary, but he didn't have like the most impressive stats in the world at North Dakota State. What are your thoughts, and what have you heard on Siegel?
Yeah, just defense in general. I tend to stay away with stats because so many of them can be misleading when it comes to football. For example, a massive nose guard that's just destructive can have like no tackles and no sacks and still be the best player on the field that day. So yeah, I stay away from defensive stats. Marcus Siegel, I think, at times, I think he was kind of a late bloomer even in college, right? Because he's at the tail end of his career, even though he still has 2 years of eligibility remaining if he wishes to use both. But I don't think he began last year as even a starter for North Dakota State, and he kind of worked himself up. So I think he's a guy that's starting to play his best football. His best football is probably still ahead of him despite his age. And I'm not necessarily too surprised, because when they brought him in, and I heard about, probably switching from corner to safety, because he played a lot of corner at North Dakota State. When you consider who else switched from corner to safety and played at North Dakota State, that was Josh Hayes. And, they've hit the lottery like repeatedly in the defensive backfield when it comes to transfers too. So not necessarily as surprised on that one, especially since I was kind of already penciling him in as a starter as well. I mean, who knows how it'll shake out? I think fall camp, at least the first week or two, they'll probably iron out who they want to rely on the most and who they don't, particularly in the secondary, because that still has feels like it has a lot of spots, positions, roles, snaps still left to be determined. So we'll find out more. But if I was going to pencil in, I would think Kobe Savage, BJ Payne, and Marquis Siegel. That's probably what I would go with, even before Big 12 Media Days. But I think I feel better about that being the three even afterwards.
All the Siegel mentions did was solidify what you told John Kurtz, Drew Galloway, and I on the drive down to Dallas to Media Days, when you brought up Siegel in the car and said how much they've been impressed with him, how good you think he could be. And then his name was consistently brought up. And then Coach Kleiman says he's the next guy that could get drafted out of the secondary. They've had Russ East, Josh Hayes, Julius Brents, et cetera, that were transfers that came in, got drafted. Kobe Savage is a junior college transfer. He's got a shot to play on Sundays as well. So yeah, it certainly makes sense. And you're right. Like, defensive stats shouldn't matter all that much, especially on the D-line, nose tackle, et cetera, at the cornerback position, safety. It's so hard to gauge. And, a guy like Josh Hayes didn't even hardly get on the field at Virginia in the year prior before he came to K-State. And then look what he did. He's a 5th-round pick of the Bucks.
Stylistic fit matters a lot, particularly with this defensive staff. I think, certain guys click, even if they haven't clicked elsewhere. So that's important. And this is not a shot too, but like we were talking in the car, Will McDonald had a really good career at Iowa State and was a 1st-round pick just this past year. But if you actually go back and look at the stats from last season, and this is not a shot at either of the two, Brendan Mott had more sacks than Will McNutt.
Yep. You're right. So I trust this coaching staff and Joe Klanderman and Chris Kleiman when it comes to secondary guys, especially in finding the right fit. So when they say things like this, ears perk up, and you got to listen to what they're saying when they're highlighting guys in the secondary position. We're going to toss to one final break, and we're going to come back, and we're just going to keep talking about some of the different things that we heard at Media Days and guys that stood out.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Four.
KC Sports.
DY, you mentioned Uso Seumalo, and every time we brought his name up to somebody, or unsolicited even, multiple times. I mean, we just had Cooper Beebe on the pod down there, and the guy we asked him about the defense, he highlighted Uso. I mean, it was the common theme throughout Big 12 Media Days. Uso maybe got raved about more than anybody, which is a huge factor given the loss of Eli Huggins, a 6-year guy, and how pivotal it was to that defense. I mean, Chris Kleiman said to you, DY, that Uso Seumalo is an all Big 12 type player heading into this season, just how he's gotten his body into shape, and just how big and physical and how well he can move. That was, I think Daniel Green said he can move like a tight end when we asked him about it. So just a really athletic, big dude that everybody has said is just unfair to block. What do you make of the significance of the comments you've heard about Uso and just how pivotal he is to this K-State defense in 2023?
Yeah, I think it was Cooper Beebe that kind of said all of that, where he said it's unfair a guy that big can move as well as he does, and they kind of can run like a tight end or a defensive end, a guy on the edge. So that's a valuable tool if it keeps coming to fruition, if he keeps ascending as a player. What I will take away the most, I guess I want to say one thing too, is that I thought 3 players probably that maybe weren't, front and center probably received the most praise when we were asking those types of questions throughout Big 12 Media Days. I thought it was Uso Seumalo, Austin Romaine, and Marquise Siegel. I thought those 3 probably stole the show in terms of attention, or compliments being heaped on to players maybe off the radar a little bit. But my biggest takeaway from Uso Seumalo and why I think he might be on the cusp of doing some really, really great things for Kansas State is when I ask about Uso, and because sometimes I don't think just words do it justice. Sometimes it's like reactions. That's like, why you want to be interviewing someone in person rather than via Zoom, because you don't have that personal interaction. But Chris Kleiman's sitting in between us, and I asked him about Uso Seumalo, and if you haven't watched the YouTube part of it, you should. He goes, like you just completely blown away by my, those types of responses, just those little things, I think can really reveal what's actually happening behind the scenes, sometimes even more powerful than just words.
Yeah, completely agree. And those are the 3 guys that to me stood out the most. Some of the other guys that were consistently mentioned too as well, DY, that weren't necessarily surprises, Keegan Johnson being one at the wide receiver position and just how special of a talent he is. Jacob Parrish, who's going to be a sophomore this year, was a true freshman last year, had meaningful snaps, played meaningful snaps in the Big 12 championship, brought up a lot. Olathe product. I think they certainly expect big things from Parrish. Is going to be penciled in as a starter at the cornerback position. I'm trying to think other guys here. Desmond Purnell. Will Howard, of course. Yeah, Will obviously sensational. And Desmond Purnell, I heard that name several times at the linebacker position as well, who played last year as a redshirt freshman, but it sounds like he's coming on even more here heading into his sophomore year.
That's been a name that has been repeatedly mentioned throughout the offseason. He's probably tell you himself, and hopefully we'll talk to him in the near future, but I think that's one of Y. Thompson's favorites of what he's seen throughout the offseason as well. Desmond Purnell, quietly had a really good year last year in his first year of real snaps. So I think he's going to be a very reliable, probably Sam linebacker. And at this point, I'm probably shocked if he's not a starter at that spot too. I thought he was really good at reserve duty a year ago. Probably they've shuffled in a lot of different types at that spot, body types, stylistic fits. I think Desmond Purnell probably reflects what they would like most at that certain position.
Chidi Obiazor was one other guy that was brought up multiple Abiazor. I'm sorry, I mispronounced it, but a DN from Minnesota, true freshman, got here for spring ball, was 6'6", 245 pounds when he arrived. I mean, I think he's only like 250, 255 currently on the roster, but his body looks really good, and he's a name that was brought up. I think Cooper Beebe said he's been the most impressive young guy on the defensive line to date. And another guy, DY, that on the drive down, you mentioned as somebody that could potentially play this year as a true freshman. And initially we thought he might be a bit of a project and need a couple years and maybe put on weight and move on down the line to D-tackle, but he seems to be flourishing at defensive end right now.
Yeah, he just really took to, because when he arrived in January as an early enroller, he really took to everything that he was being taught and told to do. Just soaked it all up, did everything he was asked. That's how you command the respect of the locker room. If you're older players right away, if you come in and just approach your work in a very mature way, and work your butt. We've heard that from a number of true freshmen that came in and just absolutely arrived on a mission. Wesley Fair and Avery Johnson are two others that come to mind. But Chidi, packing on 20 to 30 pounds in just a few months, probably accelerated his timetable to see the field for sure.
Anybody we missed, DY? Anybody you could think of that was consistently brought up that either was a surprise or not that we expected?
I don't think we missed anyone, but just that the second unit offensive line is pretty good too. So I think they're really, really happy about that group and how they've come along. And I think they're, hoping, praying, and wishing for a really good finish to the Taylor Portier story, just because of all the adversity that he's kind of ripped through in his time in Kansas State. He definitely deserves some goodwill to come his way this season.
Yeah. The offensive line could go 9-10 deep. I mean, you got Andrew Langang, you've got John Pastore, Drake Beckwith, guy that they liked, who redshirted last year as well. You could go on and on down the list. Carver Willis, another guy that they like. So there's a lot of talent up front that's in the repertoire, especially moving forward into the future, but guys that they're probably going to have to find some snaps for this year. So certainly not a bad thing there. And then Khalid Duke, I mean, he was asked, we brought him up numerous times, and they certainly seem really excited about having him at his natural pass rushing role on the D-line at D-end in this season. He's going to be a big piece.
Yeah, that's a comfortable spot for him, and they probably needed that pass rush with Felix Ndike Uzama out the door, now playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's another way to generate some, pressure on the quarterback that kind of departed with Felix, who was kind of the main staple, a guy that they could count on in that area for multiple seasons. I'd be curious because I think the defensive line is a little bit of a work in progress, and I think the offensive line is probably fairly dominant at this point. I bet those battles, at the beginning of fall camp, I'd be curious to watch those in real time. Now, we won't get the chance to do that, obviously, but I bet the offensive line is going to beat up on that defensive line a little bit in the early stages. And I bet at the end of the day, that'll be good for them because they really need the defensive line to probably come along a little bit. Not that they aren't there yet. I think Duke helps out a lot. Brendan Mott and Nate Matlack have played a lot of snaps too. But and Chris Kleiman did say, he was very honest with us and said that he's very comfortable and feels very good about the front seven at this point. I probably have more questions about the defensive line still that I need to see. Kind of need to see it to believe it. But Chris Kleiman didn't have a lack of confidence about that group. But he seemed more along the lines that they needed to shore up the back 4 or 5 rather than anything in the front 7.
Yeah, if anything, to me, it might be more of a 2-deep type where the biggest concern is I think Uso is going to be rock solid at nose. I think Khalid is going to be fine at the end. I think he's going to flourish there. Brendan Mott last year was top 10 in sacks. He had 6 sacks. Now, of course, he had Felix opposite him. So if Khalid Duke can be that guy that gets 8 to 10 sacks and in his natural pass rushing set, That would be huge. And then do you have the 2D? Is Nate Matlack healthy this year? Can he be the guy that we expected to be last year, but he battled an ankle injury all season? Because Nate Matlack has the potential.
Yeah, Nate Matlack battled a couple of ankle injuries, I think. I think he had 2 bad wheels that he was dealing with for the entirety of the season, or nearly the entirety of the season. Yeah, it'll be that position will probably be one of the ones I look at the most for the first 3 or 4 games, because I think that will tell us a lot of where they are at that time. Braden Mott was top 10 in sacks a year ago, and the conference was 6. Do have to remember, I think 3 of those were in one game.
Yeah, against West Virginia. Nose tackle, it's really a matter of like who can fill in and help Uso behind him, because you're relying on Javon Banks and Damian Ilalio, who hasn't played a lot of snaps yet. Now he's heading into his sophomore year. Can he give him 15 to 20 snaps? Manhattan High product.
Yeah, I got a feel that they're going to count on Ilalio this year.
Yeah, I agree. So, all right. Well, we threw out a lot of names there. I think there's a lot of reason to be excited, a lot of optimism, coming from Big 12 Media Days. We hope you guys have enjoyed all of the content that we brought forth so far. I believe we came out of there with 8 podcasts, and we've released 5 or 6 so far. So hopefully you guys are enjoying them. Appreciate all of the players. We had Will Howard on, Cooper Beebe, Kobe Savage, Daniel Green, Chris Kleiman. We had Stan Weber on. We may have had some audio issues with Wyatt Thompson, so we may need to re-record that one. But obviously the Brock Huard one that we just released for you here. And who could forget the comments from Tim Weiser, former K-State athletic director and deputy commissioner currently of the Big 12 Conference, who apparently made some Texas and Oklahoma fans mad. That's the rumor. I don't know why, but that's what I've heard from that podcast that we released last Wednesday. So anyways, we appreciate all of you listening to all of the coverage as we gear up for what should be a really exciting football season. Remember to subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy this coverage. Leave us a rating or review on Apple or Spotify. Let us know how we're doing. Leave a comment on YouTube. Subscribe to the KCSNU YouTube channel as well if you enjoy the coverage on YouTube. So appreciate all your support. Appreciate the support of our partners, Home Field Apparel and Holiday Distillery and Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon 360 Vodka. Stock up for the upcoming season. Appreciate BY for jumping on the pod with us as we push out another show, and appreciate Nick Springer behind the scenes for making the magic happen and producing the show. So thank you all, and we'll talk to you soon.